According to a recent NBC News report, about 10% of U.S. citizens 60 years old or older are victims of elder abuse. If you are one who falls into that category, today on Weekend Connection, we want you to know.
You do not have to be abused. It is not your fault. And there are services out there to help you get through whatever is going on.
I'm Vic Gregorie, and let's get connected. Welcome to our broadcast. According to an article at the U.S. News and World Report website, 75 million people from the baby boomer generation are on the verge of retirement. And over the next 2 decades, about 10,000 U.S. citizens will reach the traditional retirement age of 65 each day. Now, this is a time when individuals will look forward to enjoying the fruit of their hard work. Unfortunately, many of them will find their quality of life in jeopardy because of elder abuse. Joining me today is Trudy Gregorie. She is the president of the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. NCPEA is an association of researchers, practitioners, educators, and advocates dedicated to protecting the safety, security, and dignity of America's elderly. Trudy, welcome to our broadcast today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. And let's begin by defining what we mean when we speak of the abuse of the elderly. The topic may bring to mind thoughts of physical mistreatment, but the practice is far more encompassing, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is, Vic. Elder abuse can affect people of all ethnic backgrounds and social status. It can affect both men and women. Some of the types of abuse that are commonly accepted as the major categories of elder mistreatment include not only physical abuse, but also emotional abuse. Inflicting mental pain or distress on an elder person through verbal or nonverbal acts. It includes sexual abuse. It includes financial exploitation, which is the illegal taking, misuse, or concealment of funds or property or assets of a vulnerable elder. It includes neglect, which would be the refusal or the failure by those responsible to provide food or adequate shelter, health care, or protection for a vulnerable elder. And it also, in recent years, has come to include abandonment, which is the desertion of a vulnerable elder by anyone who's assumed the responsibility of care or custody of that person. It's not uncommon for an elder to experience more than one type of mistreatment at the same or different times. For example, a person being financially exploited might also be neglected to provide appropriate care, food, or medication. And elder abuse can truly happen to anyone. 90% of all abusers are, in fact, family members. 50% of those are adult children, 20% are spouses or some other type of a partner, and other abusers would be friends or neighbors or service providers. Elder abuse happens in all our families and communities, and it's a very far-reaching problem with a lot of different dimensions.
Well, that brings up our next question. Just how far-reaching is elder abuse in the United States?
The latest research indicates that 1 in 10 Americans who are over the age of 60 experience abuse each year. And as I say, many experience it in multiple forms. The National Elder Abuse Incidence Study estimates that only 1 in 14 cases of elder abuse ever comes to the attention of the authorities. And the New York State Elder Abuse Prevalence Study found that for every case known to programs and agencies, there were 24 more that were unknown. So what we know about the 1 in 10 is only the tip of the iceberg of what's actually happening in our communities.
Well, let's focus a bit on the aspect of financial exploitation. According to a recent report that I saw by the MetLife Insurance Company, an estimated $2.9 billion was lost due to the financial abuse of elders. And Trudy, those numbers are absolutely staggering. If you would, describe a typical scenario of a senior citizen being exploited by a loved one or a trusted financial advisor.
A typical scenario would indeed include a perpetrator who is either a loved one of the elder or someone the elder has a trust relationship with, such as a financial advisor or some other professional, such as a personal attorney. It would usually include patterns of spending or withdrawals from an older adult's bank account or savings account, frequent purchases of inappropriate items, a bank account withdrawals that are made in spite of penalties that might be there, bills going unpaid, utilities being turned off, or the presence in the older person's life of a new best friend or companion who is now accepting generous gifts from the older adult. All of those may be signs that he or she is being taken advantage of financially. Mm-hmm. And the older adult might particularly be at risk if they depend on others for meeting many of their personal needs, especially their caregiving. If they've recently lost a spouse or a loved one who handled their finances, if family or friends regularly handle their finances and they aren't really allowed to handle their finances anymore, if they feel isolated from society, if they have difficulty understanding finances, or if they live in a long-term care setting. All of those factors make them more vulnerable for someone, a loved one or a trusted financial advisor, to take advantage of their finances and their property.
Now, Trudy, you said earlier that there are about 10% of people over 60 years of age who have experienced some type of elder abuse, but that there are many other cases that go unreported. Explain to us why that would be the case.
Victims of elder abuse and neglect and financial exploitation very often feel ashamed or embarrassed because of what's happening to them, and don't want the community or the authorities to know that they can't handle their finances, or that indeed a family member may be the one who is abusing them. So it can be extremely difficult to tell others that someone you trust and love is exploiting you or taking advantage of you. And making matters worse, abusers very often blame their victims, telling them that the abuse is all their fault, threatening them if they reveal the abuse to anyone. And if the older person is dependent on that abuser for care, he or she may feel as if they don't have an option but to live in fear and pain and live with the financial abuse, even though they want it to stop. And if an older person is new to this country or has difficulty speaking English, it makes it even harder for them, and they may not know how to get help. Many older individuals don't even realize that what is happening to them is a crime. And so very often they comply with the threats and the demands that are made on them.
Well, let's say this right up front in case we have a victim of elder abuse listening right now. Let's let them know, Trudy, that indeed what is happening to them, if they are experiencing what you just described, indeed is a crime.
Absolutely.
We're talking with Trudy Gregorie. She is the president of the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And Trudy, I know that a growing number of states are passing laws to help prevent the exploitation of the elderly, and the federal government is beginning to address the issue as well. One of the things that recently was done by Congress was the passing of the Federal Elder Justice Act. Talk to us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Certainly. The Elder Justice Act is the first national comprehensive legislation to address elder abuse. It was a bipartisan initiative that was first introduced in 2002, but wasn't enacted into law until 2010. We worked very hard for the 8 years to get that law passed. It authorizes federal resources to prevent, detect, treat, intervene, and prosecute elder abuse, neglect, and exploitation. It requires things like the establishment of an Elder Justice Coordinating Council, an advisory board on elder abuse, the establishment of forensic centers to examine cases of elder abuse, the enhancement of long-term care, greater funding for state and local adult protective services, and training for criminal justice and community leaders on these efforts. It will, for the first time, have a broad federal response to elder abuse that will then encourage states to begin to take those kind of broad steps as well.
Very good. Now, what about senior citizens who have yet to become exploited? Are there steps that they can take to protect themselves before they get to the place where they are susceptible to this type of activity?
Absolutely. On an individual level, all of those who work in elder victim services would certainly say there are some simple but vital steps that can help reduce risk for seniors. One is to take care of your health as much as possible, to plan for your future with your family, with those who can provide you some assistance so that it will be much harder for perpetrators to access your property and funds. To stay active in the community, be connected with friends and family, with your local church group. And this will decrease social isolation, which is one of the greatest risk factors for elder abuse. Know your rights. If you engage the services of a paid or a family caregiver, you have the right to voice your preferences, to check out their references. If you live in a nursing home or a board and care home, make sure that you know how to access the long-term care ombudsman. Make sure you're protecting your financial information as much as possible. Always make sure to be cautious, to stay connected, and if indeed you suspect that you are being victimized by a family or a friend, contact law enforcement, contact local adult protective services, and they will help you understand whether or not the situation is one that should be looked into, and they will provide that investigation if necessary. So it's, let someone know what's happening. A friend or a trusted family member, a health care provider, your pastor, your friends at church. Stay connected and report anything that raises a suspicion for you.
Now, if someone wanted to get in touch with your agency, and I'm sure that the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse is also a helpful resource that can come alongside of elderly, first of all, to help them to protect themselves so that they don't become victims, and also, if they do become a victim, to help them to get out of that situation. How does your committee help, and how would people be able to get in touch with them?
Absolutely. We have, among our membership and involved individuals, we have people from every profession, every discipline that works in the area of elder abuse and elder services. We will be glad to listen to your story and to provide you with advice and with referrals. If you choose to call, our number is 800-677-1116. It's a toll-free number that can provide information and referrals to services in your area.
And the toll-free phone number, one more time, 1-800-677-1116. And we will have those on file here at BBN as well. We've been talking with Trudy Gregorie. Trudy is the president for the National Committee for the Prevention of Elder Abuse. And Trudy, thank you for helping to inform us about this tragic activity that's taking place in our nation today. That's our broadcast. Next week, Stephen Brown will be your host and will address another topic of community interest on Weekend Connection. We invite you to join us next Saturday afternoon at 4:02 Eastern, right here on the Bible Broadcasting Network.
Thank you for listening to this feature, a production of BBN, the Bible Broadcasting Network. BBN provides 24-hour Christian programming, great Christian music, and Bible teaching. Listen to BBN by clicking the link in the description.